So if you not notice your user getting stuck somewhere, you can ask them. Okay, although I'm asking you to, earlier I asked you to stay quiet, but if you see that the user is really confused, or you're just wondering why is the user always clicking on the leftmost button, you can, if there are certain behaviors that are piquing your interest, then you should definitely ask the user, why are they doing certain behavior? What is the reason behind what they're doing? And so you can clarify your confusions, because remember, your prototype is still being developed, so you can still learn a lot about users. So it might be that you learn that all the users are always looking on the left side or the right side of the screen, and so then so based on that observation, for example, you will have to move all the task buttons on the right side of the screen instead of on the left side. Okay, so if there's some odd or unusual or interesting behavior of the user, try to get to the bottom of it. And then you can answer users' question as long as as long as the answering those questions doesn't bias the test. If you cannot help them complete a certain task, you can tell them, sorry, I cannot tell you how to do the task. You have to figure it out on your own. And if you cannot do it, it's not your fault, it's the interface fault, and it's totally okay. So just make them feel comfortable. Yeah, so and you can also ask them, if you are just stuck in this task and it's just too long, then you can just give up and move on to the other task. That's just totally okay. All right, so once the testing phase is over, then it's the feedback phase, which is the second last phase of the usability test. So in this phase, there are different things that you can do. You can give a paper survey to the user and ask them to fill out the questions on that sheet of paper. You can just have like a small discussion with the user. Anything that you observed during the test, you can ask them questions about it, or you can ask the user to just give their feedback about their experience. So anything that's the free feedback phase is about talking to the user and collecting the data that you wanted to. All right, so yeah, so don't make sure that you don't ask too many questions. Don't make your feedback session, feedback phase too long, and just keep the questions focused and to the point. And you can only achieve this if you do your pre-study phase really well, if you test out your study materials really well. Okay, so I will give you some links to some common usability evaluation instruments that are used by the usability testers frequently when they are running usability tests. And you should be using either an existing usability evaluation instrument, or you can create your own as well for your final project. If you're going to create your own, then maybe you can ask them to rate your system according to their experience outcomes. So yeah, so you will be, so for example, let me explain this more actually. So for example, if one of your user experience goals was to to make the task fun, right? So your goal was to make the task fun for the user. You can ask the user to do that task. And then at the end, in the feedback phase, you can ask the user to rate the fun factor. How fun was the prototype? And then you can ask them to rate it on a scale. Okay, so this is an example of a survey. So I feel, so if your goal was to make the user feel safe about entering their account information, then you can ask this question: I feel safe about saving my personal information in this app. And then you can ask them to circle from on this scale where, strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. Okay. And then if your one goal was to have an app that's going to promote friendliness among its users, then you can ask this question from your user whether this app is promoting the collegiality among its users or not, and so on and so forth. Okay, so it's important that every statement of the survey, it gets to the heart of the target user experience goals. So that's why I had been asking you to just figure out, just be very clear on what your user experience goals are going to be. So you can assess your prototype for those user experience goals. Did you actually manage to meet those goals or not? Okay, so last phase is the exit phase of the study. So once you are done with the feedback phase, then obviously it's time for user to leave. So you can ask them to, you can just thank them for their time, and tell them you have been really helpful. If you have any questions, you can give them your email where they can follow up, and send them any queries. Sometimes people like to share the results of the usability test with the users. If that's what you're going to do, you should tell the user that we will be sending you the results, a report on the usability test, which is going to summarize what we found out. If you're interested, we can send it to you. You're not going to share the recordings of the usability test with anybody. And then when the user is leaving, make sure you are saving them properly so that you don't lose this important information that you work so hard to get. Okay. So exit phase is about saying goodbye to the user and thanking them, and then wrapping up the study in your lab, and also just preparing for the next user. Okay, so after you have conducted all the usability tests, so as I told you in the beginning that you are required to do like 5 to 10 user tests typically. In this class, I think I'm limiting it to maybe 3 to 4 users because you might not have access to so many people right now. So after you have done all the usability tests, then obviously you have to analyze the data that you have collected. So you will probably have, by the end of the usability tests, you will have qualitative data. So qualitative data just consists of all the information that you collected from the user as you were in conversation with them, at the end of the study. So you ask them like, how did they find the user, the user interface? What were they satisfied with it? Were there any negative comments, positive comments? So just try to get that feel from your qualitative data. And then you will also have the user's performance metrics. So as I told you, the performance metrics could consist of number of tasks that were completed successfully, number of errors that were made, the amount of time that was spent on certain tasks, and types of errors that users made. So you might end up doing some quantitative analysis, and it's going to be very simple kind of analysis where you will just report the mean, mode, or medium. Like for example, you'll say that on average, it took users 15 minutes to complete this task. On average, people make 3 errors while completing this task. Or on average, 5 errors were made in every 10 minutes or something like that. Okay, so you'll either report mean, mode, or medium of your the performance metrics that you collected. And then the final thing that you have to analyze will be the survey responses. So remember, you gave users those surveys. You're gonna analyze how many people, for example, strongly agreed with a certain question. So how many people were strongly agreed with the fact that the app was fun to use. So you can say, okay, 2 people were strongly in agreement that the app is fun to use. 3 people were strongly in agreement that the app was safe to use, and the remaining 2 said that were disagreed with the fact that the app is safe to use.